So I just want to grab everybody's attention for a minute and thank everybody for coming. This is really our first HOA HOA informational session. We're calling it that because we're going to have it both ways. We're going to do with a very short PowerPoint just to give you an overview, and then we're going to have a lot of questions and answer periods that we're going to be putting together. I want to remind everybody, if anybody has anything like very specific about a situation in their particular community or something, it probably would be best after we introduce everybody and you get to know us to just schedule an appointment with somebody here at staff. And you can, always come in and talk more specific about your particular issues or concerns, because then we can get the right people in the room and make sure that we're addressing. We can do some research and get the drawings for your HOA out and actually study what we're looking at before we start talking. General questions tonight, all welcome. So I do want to welcome everybody. I want to just turn it over for introductions initially. Mayor Jameson's here, and I just want to turn it over to him to introduce.
That is Bob. He is Bob Buscemi. He's the community development director. And I'll keep this. I'll just scream. I'll keep this short. I've been fortunate enough to be mayor for the last 2 years for the city. Prior to that, I was on city council, and then prior to that, I was on the planning commission, which I think y'all probably maybe talk about a little bit later, which is our kind of zoning board. I just want to say I'm so glad we're doing this. It's awesome to see this many engaged citizens that are representing our community. I will tell you, at the council level, if you've read the paper over the last year or two, a lot of the stuff that we've had to deal with is HOA related issues, for good or for bad. I will tell you, I personally would not like to deal with those. I would like those issues to stay within y'all's neighborhood. Y'all do a tremendous job for whatever neighborhood that y'all represent. Your bylaws should control your neighborhood and not be at the council level. But I want you to know we are here to be a resource for you. I'm always open. I'm always available. Whether or not it's the good, the bad, or the ugly, you can always reach out to me. And I just want you to know our entire staff, police, fire, community development, Parks and Rec, Public Works, we are very forward facing. We want to be engaged with y'all. And please let us know if you have anything on top of your mind that we can really help out and help y'all. I'm going to go shuffle some kids around to some sports activities. But if y'all have any questions that come up from the discussion that y'all need to talk to me about, I'm always here and always welcome to have that conversation. So I really appreciate y'all coming out. Thank you.
Okay, so introductions. I'm Bob Buscemi. I'm the Community Development Director, like the mayor said. I'll turn it over to Robin.
You asked me to do this. So
Yes, you can turn it over to you.
Okay. Yes, that's Bob. We're also known as Bob the Builder in the old days because he's also our city architect. So just want to welcome the police and fire. We have Captain Barstow from our police department, and we have Assistant Fire Chief and Fire Marshal Alex Fortner. Yeah, and then we have Sandra DeWitt, our arborist is here, and Gary Mullinex is going to be doing the most of the speaking with, he's our chief building official. Rob Del Ross is in the back. He's our public works transportation engineer. Obviously, Bob is here, and then Rima Abdella is also here. She is our zoning tech and helped coordinate and contact you guys. So did a lot of hard work. So we appreciate that. So again, as Bob stated, we're not really here. This isn't a complaint session per se, but we want to be able to give you a lot of information that we hopefully will be helpful to you and your communities and your subdivisions and your residents. And like the mayor said, we're always here to, respond to you or answer your questions and hopefully be able to resolve anything or give you the direction you need. So with that, we'll start the PowerPoint. And oh, I wanted to say, somebody asked me, this is being recorded. So we'll put this on the website. So if any other members of your communities want to listen to it, watch it, it'll be available. So. Huh? Oh, I'm sorry. I thought everybody knew me. No, I'm just joking. I'm Robin McDonald. I'm the zoning manager. So anyway, that's who I am. Yeah. You don't need that.
I'm Gary Mullings. I'm the building official for the city of Milton, and it's good to see everybody here. We're gonna try to do this on a regular basis, you know, to kind of get updated, kind of get the current information about this, you know, complex relationship. Obviously, there's a lot of overlap between us and the HOAs and the citizens and how this all works. We've had a lot of circumstances come to us. Trying to make sure we assign that properly to the authorities that, you know, have jurisdiction over those kind of matters. And we'll talk about that. We'll talk about some of the issues that come up with the HOAs and how they're managed from the beginning, because sometimes there's a lot of new people managing projects that are recently turned over, you know, as the developer finishes and the new HOA takes over the community. That's one of the things we'll put. So we'll talk about some history and some benefits of the authorities and the Georgia laws and some of the standards and site development. So those are kind of the broad topics we'll cover. This is not a long presentation. It's probably going to take 30, 45 minutes. If you have questions, we're going to get to the point at the end where we're going to have an opportunity to bring up questions you may have about it. And also, like I said, we're going to be taping this, so it'll be available. And also, cards are up here. If you want to get communication with certain stakeholders from the city's perspective and the basic districts they manage, and including myself. And also at the end, we'll put this up on a slide at the end of this presentation. So, yeah, as far as some of the contact emails, contact phone numbers and such. So obviously the city is committed to working with citizens and HOA leaders, you know, because it is really a relationship that we're trying to build. And that's one of the things that, you know, this transparency hopefully will support. So everybody knows what the roles are, knows how to reach out to folks and find answers that you're looking for, find out how that fits to your particular rules and regulations or covenants of your HOA. And obviously our mission, both from the perspective of what I do for the building perspective, safety and protecting equity. And Milton has a grand, you know, reality of equity. You know, this is I won't say it's just a famous city, but it is a high equity city, right? This is a destination city. This is one of the top cities in all of Georgia for quality of life, for a variety of reasons. We're here to help manage that and protect it. And HOAs are vital to the community because they do protect it. Protect that value. So, you know, there's a history of HOAs, and I did a little research into it. I knew some of this, but it's kind of interesting that this goes way back to the mid-17th, 19th century, and then 1960s in the boom, the baby boomer boom, and a lot of communities came together. They wanted to kind of instill some higher quality standards, some responsibilities, some management of the infrastructure that might be inside our community, and manage that became a value added to communities and also citizens. So these are the kind of things that most HOAs have in common, and there are HOAs and there are POAs, property close to homeowner, but they're a little bit different. But all of them are empowered, right, with the necessity to belong if you're going to purchase a home in this community. Part of the closing documents that you have to engage in. And they have the authority to operate and hold homeowners accountable. And also they have a wide spectrum of lien-based assessment values, right? Depending on how the covenants are written, what is available to the community to address what they term to be their relationship, their deficiencies they may come to address with some of their homeowner participants, the people that are in the homeowner association, and how they would manage that. And we get involved with that sometimes, you know, because we hear about it and talk about how that fits with us. So These are the kind of things that are generally the tasks associated with HOA responsibilities. Administrating the business of the HOA, maintaining shared property, and this is obviously different in every community. Sometimes you have spaces that are being managed, they have to be landscape, protected, whatever. You might have green spaces, you might have buildings, you might have mail kiosks, it could be any number of different structures or elements in the community that you may have to maintain. Obviously, that's something that could be in your HOA covenants about what your responsibilities were. Enhancing real estate equity, obviously, supporting property rights and managing and enforcing rules. So there are different types of HOAs. Most what we see is the individuals that belonging to a subdivision that's a single family residential environment, right? But it could also be condominiums that are held sort of in common, especially the infrastructure itself. And I spent some time working for FEMA. I did a lot of this kind of, how this works with insurance and who pays and flooded environments, and the whole community has to come together to support a certain faction of their community. Like I was in Nashville flood, there was like 9 buildings that were flooded out of about 20 in this condominium complex, and everybody who owned a condo had to help pay for fixing these buildings, because generally in a condo you own the air inside the building and the rest of the infrastructure of the building is held in common. All those covenants are managed the same way as the HOA would be for a single family dwelling subdivision. And then cooperatives, shared ownership among all members. This is more kind of exclusivity. We don't see a lot of this, but obviously that could happen. So there are benefits, right? Protects property values, property owners from dragging down property values, right? And not, there are other rules, obviously, that in HOA communities there are enhanced standards of performance. And in the general sense, there's a performance for property maintenance that the city manages from a code enforcement perspective. Some of that stuff overlaps. Like your all weeds and grass, for instance, right? It could be covenants about that, about maintaining your landscape. City would have responsibility to manage that as well if it was something that our ordinances managed. And so, those values are something that, we would support, right? But it would be something that we could go beyond our standards to enforce. Our property maintenance standards are basically again, the safety, the protection of the home, making sure it's weatherproof, making sure it has, the property is being maintained from the standpoint of it's just not, overgrown weeds, grass all over the place. I would think most of the time HOA would manage that before it got to us, but we do that, right? And we will do that as in the same perspective in any community, just like we would if there was no HOA. Better amenities, you may have clubhouses, gyms, pools, green spaces, walking trails. It promotes a good community citizenship, living experiences, manage even animals, right? Make noise, that kind of stuff. We have rules about that in the city too. Solves community disputes and valuable resource for resolving problems, advocates for all homeowners, living within the rules of the community. So this, obviously there's benefits to this. Added value. And Milton's all about added value. That's what this happens to, right? Have enhanced systems, protocols, standards. The rural view shed is a good example. We actually have that as a standard for architectural treatments in community and buildings that are not even all in HOAs. We make sure that everybody's kind of working together to enhance property values by making sure certain streets, rural view sheds, or making artery roads, things like that, their standards are met for architectural treatment. Part of our upgraded standard. So in Georgia, authority derives from the declaration of the covenants and articles of declaration and bylaws, and the essential contract between the community members where homeowners agree to comply with the covenants and restrictions. This comes to usually at a closing. Will gauge all these documents that are closing, and one of them will be these list of covenants that are associated with this community. I would suspect not everybody pours over at the closing. It's probably a good idea to read all that prior to getting there to make sure you understand what your responsibility is going to be. Relationship you're going to engage in factually and civilly with this homeowners association. Hours are, what they manage, what their remedies are, what that looks like. There could be things that totally agree with. Other things you say, well, that's a little stretch. That's in the document is something that needs to be looked at. Better not, having to pour over at a closing table, obviously. That's just probably not the best time to be doing these items. This document, figure out what the little rules are and what are the remedies in case we have, kind of disagreement about what the rules may visual. By purchasing a home in the community, homeowners accept contractual obligations and empowerments of the HOA. You're relinquishing that power to a board, to people that are elected or chosen to represent this HOA, and they will be administering these rules and standards and interfacing with their community, taking complaints if there are, or whatever, managing them, sending notices, letters, whatever that process is, engaging with attorneys against that. We're dealing with a couple right now where that's actually the case. We have attorneys involved with disputes between HOAs, property owners. Board members are legal authorities for the association to act within express powers, and this is a Georgia OCGA standard. Within the parameters of what the state of Georgia permits, you can act. Only as long as that covenant document doesn't violate any higher standard. Pretty much it's like home rule. It's like what the city does. It's a home rule government. As long as we're not violating a state or a federal law in the way we enact our business in the city. Nature of the declarative relief you get based on the fact that not violating some higher standard, then everybody agrees to whatever that standard may be for performance. So the city can make rules, HOAs can make rules, and notwithstanding they're violating someone's rights or some federal law or something like that, they get Georgia law affords deference to associations' declaration articles as long as the rules are reasonable and don't conflict with state or federal law. So they are private governance entities. We are a governance entity as well, right? But these are private. We're more like a public governance. Still administer rules and standards the same way the HOA would, just from a private perspective, from a civil perspective, from a contractual perspective. Board of Directors enforce contracted obligations with member owners, empowered to collect and regulate assessments for owners to maintain amenities, provide services, including private roads and security. If you have private roads, there could be responsibilities for that. There was a development official back in the early 2000s, and I was a development official. We dealt with this all the time, right? There's a lot more going on in Canada all the time. We had developments up there, 1,200 homes. Handing over, community sections to HOAs, and sometimes people were well versed at this process. Sometimes, they were rookies, right? They were buying new homes, and everybody got together and decided, here's how we're going to regulate these standards. And there was some strange rules up there. I gotta tell you, there was some strange. But that's not my business, right? I mean, I was like, you can't park your pickup truck in the driveway. That kind of stuff. I go, okay, we're not regulating that, okay? I don't know kind of we get that later. I'm driving a pickup truck has to be in the garage. Okay. We had one section that said you couldn't put gutters on the house. And they had these private French, well, there was private, but it was a design of French drain around the house to take the water and move it away from the building. Mailbox had to be a certain thing, there could be something else. I'll tell you one story we had here where a guy came in and got a permit for me to replace a deck. We gave him a permit, right? Editor's building, he gave us stuff to work. Well, the HOA called and said, the guy he can't put in 6x6 support posts. They gotta be metal. I understand that. But from the code perspective, it could be a 6x6 post, right? That's a contractual responsibility he had to satisfy based on his responsibility to satisfy his civil contract responsibility to the HOA. And he changed it, you know. He didn't want the trouble, obviously. But he turned it into me. I couldn't scream for that. I wouldn't even know if that was a rule. But if we look at a place, right? It was like a townhome and all the rest of them are metal posts. This is like this thing. I get that. You could argue that looked out of place, right? Or he kind of creates, and I've had other issues come up that are code, the ordinances, and then, you know, there are other things that pop up and go, well, I had no idea that you guys were overtly concerned with that certain thing. I said, I understand that you are. It gets past me. I don't have any reason legally to say no to it. That's may have powers to levy special assessments of property owners to pay for noncompliance and other expenses. Every HOA has different enforcement powers and capabilities to assess properties and lien property. Say, I'm going to register a lien against your property for this value we assess, which you do noncompliance for you based on your covenants of our HOA. You need to be aware of. If it's in your covenants, you need to know how that works, what your processes are for appealing it. You don't just read it. Haven't read it, you need to read it. I guess obviously most of the people in this room have read these things because you guys are like the people that manage these sort of things. Better your members are, the better it is for everyone. I mean, these things can be checked up front without getting out of hand before somebody has to pay a lot of money to make some kind of corrections. So from the building permit perspective, permits are required whenever structure is erected, constructed, reconstructed, moved, altered, whatever. Permits normally not required for small repairs. I have I'm going to probably make a presentation about that in the next couple of months here. Sort of an outreach to everyone, not just HOAs, and say, hey, when do you need a permit? What kind of projects require permitting? And I'm not doing that right now, but suffice to say, if you're not sure, call them what do you permits? Give me an answer. And I would couch that whole process as the benefit of a permit. Right? The benefit of a permit will protect you in case the permit's required and you don't accomplish one. I've seen a couple of houses, you know, lose sales of the house because they finished the basement without a permit. Now they're coming back and the buyer realized that the tax file at Fulton County didn't match the sale of the number of, you know, feet per square foot or maybe extra bedroom or something like that. And when they find that out, the buyer gets really kind of skittish about it and they'll just walk away from the sale. Counting on their sale, somebody that doesn't want it because you have to do this non-permitted work. I'm not sure it's calling that. That's my best. But we'll provide other information about that as well. Contact the city to confirm. Standard operating procedures are available to the city to help clarify permitting requirements. We have a standard operating procedure that describes this in some detail. I mean, if you make it too long, there's about 50 pages of stuff, but there's a lot of stuff we have to manage. So I try to get it to where if you need to find certain information about your permit and what that means in the process, how it happens, how it ends, inspection process, destruction process, the plan review process, and all that, it can get complicated, but we try to streamline it the best way we can. And provide the information so everybody can clearly understand how that's going to function. Associations may incorporate architectural standards and covenants, requiring members to gain approval, you know, essentially prior to the submitting to us. This is my recommendation. To the members. is best if everybody knows if there's something that the HOA is concerned about from a construction standpoint of permitting for, submit it to the HOA before they give it to us. We have no way of tracking that, no way of verifying that. But obviously, it's best if that happens in that, because then we don't have this problem of, you know, we issue a permit and it conflicts with some HOA standard. Somebody didn't submit it to the HOA first. We already issued a permit. That happens. So to the degree that you are giving the information to all of the, I don't know what the outreach you have with all your members, whatever, letters, figure out outreaches or have contact. Constant contact. And say, hey, look, check with us to see if we have a oversight for your project. Manage that process or require that as a standard. Because you can see how if that was the case, then how would we even know what they gave us was what you approved? Not gonna happen. And also, we can't really validate that we would be looking at or screening this project for compliance with a myriad of HOA covenants, which are fundamentally different in some regard. Everyone is different in some regard. So the initial process is best managed prior to property owners' application for permit to the city, as we may approve a scope of work in conflict with the covenants. Avoid that if we can. Best way to, you're always going to have a potential failure rate, right? But if we can make that a real small number so we can manage it more effectively, you have less need to address the individuals for deference to your covenants, whatever, less time spent, less fees associated with, you know, dealing with that, or letters back and forth, and then you get attorney involved, all kind of stuff gets avoided if possible. So, and we'll support that. We can even, we may even bring out something to send out as a blanket, you know, like Facebook and stuff. We want to say this is what we know. This is what we need. Well, helps process be more efficient and flow better. We can help with that. That's certainly the education part of it. So this is kind of like a thing that we wanted to discuss briefly because I go in these communities all the time, right? And some of them are guarded, some of them are just access coded. We have to do inspections, we have to do a variety of things where the community, you know, has to be accessed by city officials, usually inspectors, site inspectors, could be building. Could be other staff, could be planning and zoning change something, could be arborists. Anybody who had a business to go in there to verify something, that you meet with an applicant or meet with a homeowner, probably verify whether or not we have a convention. We would need to get access. So it's different everywhere, but let's make sure every time somebody asks for that, to make sure we either have access codes or somebody has direct access. But sometimes I've done that before. And I'm in many places where I've been out there and said, no, we can't. There's nobody home. I can't call. I don't know. Whatever. So no. Well, you didn't understand. I believe it. Right? And this inspection is not going to happen. These people are not going to be happy when they find out they're the one that kept me out of the community to go in there and build inspection aid. That has happened. So just make sure that, you know, if you're a contractor or something like that, if you want to have access, make sure we give us a gate code. We got to push in numbers, or if the people at the front gate are screening people, make sure that they know, expect. Now, and so they need to be informed, and likely we will have city ID always, right? And we'll have an address we're going to, and we will always have city logos on our vehicles, so we're kind of identified. Hopefully that'll be enough, right? I understand sometimes it's been a problem. It has been a problem for me. I don't take that seriously. I just say, hey, look, you'll get a phone call. Because their schedule is interrupted by the fact I can't access the property. So communicate with contractors and employees if that's the case, because especially if somebody begins. So this is kind of like the bottom line of it, the general sense of what we do. We're not empowered to enforce conditions not specifically delegated in the local codes of ordinances. That means the local building code of ordinances, which reference the building codes and such like that. Mandated construction codes, standards that come out of planning, zoning, and all these other aspects of the site development that are part of the city of Milton's code of ordinances. Those are always available online. If anybody wants to know where to access that in a Word format, you contact me, I'll send you that information. The code has a copy of the city ordinance. You know, if you ever need to go in there and just hunt something, just put a search parameter and it'll pull you to the section you're looking for. So you have access to that information as well. It's important to have the correct information and know what we're going to be enforcing. So at times, code enforcement concerns may overlap with HOA concerns. That happens. So it's not all just separated. Some of it is, especially the property maintenance part of it. Sometimes it is. Like if somebody says, well, the house is dilapidated from the standpoint of the roofs leaking or some kind of thing like that, we couldn't be involved with that in a property maintenance perspective or compliance. So everything is completely separated. And the property maintenance code is something we do what's called code enforcement. On the regulatory part of the building part is me, plumbing, mechanical, building, electrical, site, planning, zoning, hardware, things like that for you. Those are different departments of public works deal with the right of way. But some of this stuff in property maintenance especially does overlap. So we'll have questions about that. Cards, contact, you know, just reach out. We need a resolution like you do. So we are available to support determination to assign the concerns effectively. It's not clear about what that looks like as far as what our authorities are and where we fit into this compliance. We're happy to meet about it, talk about it, come meet us or on the phone or meet out there to discuss it, whatever. And we will do what we are authorized to do. Certainly we want to. So by communicating those unclear concerns with the city and the building department, we can support the closure of these maintenance matters especially. So the city has on the website, you can go to it, just search see, click, fit, right? And these are the links. I just put these up here. And this PowerPoint will be available too, you know. But these are the communication points for reporting things to the city. It may not just be property, it could be a pothole on the street, it could be anything that looks odd, you want somebody to check it out, you got a problem with you know, structure thing, something looks unsafe, you know, you may say, oh, my neighbors are probably next up. Maybe something we want to check out, you know, and we will do that. You report to us, we sign to the right individual, and we check it out as quickly as necessary to go out there and make sure it's safe. There's also compliance. And also we're keeping a constant update of the HOA contact. So as your administration may change over time, whatever, I don't know, address whatever changes, the contact, whatever, get in touch with us. There's actually an email for that too. You can get in there and update the information. But if we have outreach, we're reaching the right people to give them the information. I guess I'll talk about site development. So, so site development has sort of responsibility, especially in new construction, take a scope of work from a site perspective, and that is like what's called land disturbance permits. Streets, infrastructure, detention ponds, utilities, things like that. And they would basically get to a certain point where the developer says, I'm done, and we do the inspections for it, right? And then we approve it, And during this process, they're giving us bonds to ensure that this was in fact going to be completed. In that process, we've been inspected clients, then we will release those bonds. And usually they're either cash bonds or surety bonds or things. And that's something we would do. And then the responsibilities that fall to the HOA would be or by the HOA. So like if you had a private street behind a gated community, those are always going to be private. It doesn't maintain roads that are behind gated communities. But you can't stop the rest of the taxpayers from using them, right? They're paying to repair them, they're public. So making sure that they're at a kind of stabilized condition before we hand it over becomes part of what we do. We obviously send our team out to look at it to verify that it is ready to be handed over to the HOA, who at some point, in maybe 5 years, 10 years, who knows what, you know, they have to come back in there and maintain that road. Maybe asphalt the whole thing, and sometimes that's a serious dollar amount, right? Making sure that it is like out of the box, meeting the standard it needs to meet. It's not failing on day 2, right? It's not alligators up and pressures in and stuff like that. It's something we would be responsible to manage at the final inspection prior to releasing the bonds. And that's important to know where we fit into that process. And that same thing goes with detention ponds. If there's a detention pond for stormwater management on site, usually that's managed by the HOA. Sometimes in the past it's been managed by whoever owns the property it sets on, which can be a cost for property. As in Canton, we took them all. We got easements and we took maintenance of all the ponds because maintaining a pond can be, get out there and dig out all the dirt, restore the water service elevations, and then make sure it's going to be prepared for the next storm, store water, and release it at a rate that's not detrimental to the downstream, right? Let's do their regulatory to release water at a pre-construction rate of the discharge. But it takes money to maintain them, both from the fencing and what's inside it, keeping the trees from growing on the dam, and making sure that the dirt that builds up in there is taken out every now and then and cleaned up, and it has the right storage capacity. That can be an expense. So we approve plats and LDPs, easements, and or rights of way are recorded. Project infrastructure may be private or public. Gated communities are always private roads. Detention ponds, curb, gutter. You know, if somebody gets over to driving over the curb and gutter and trashing it, cleaning it up. Well, it's on a public street, that falls to the HOA really, because they're responsible to maintain. That's right away / easement. A community. And performance bonds are required. We always manage that. So cash or surety, for LDP plan, that's part of the standard in the ordinance. If you read the development standards for issuing land disturbance permits, this bonding, this performance bonds are required. We make sure they're gonna get done. And you can see how you can be halfway built through, let's say, a dozen homes in the community, and suddenly the road gets all bad because of heavy traffic, heavy dumping trucks, and all kinds of heavy equipment, and it trashes the road. Well, you know, who's going to fix that? That's why we got these bonds in case that guy breaks camp and leaves. But again, we sold these properties to a builder, right? Now we can't buy it. So we have this bond in case we need to pull it out and fix this stuff before we actually turn them over to HOA. And Canton used to do it 80%, and 8% build out or 90%. Released upon completion and acceptance. At that point, the HOA takes maintenance if the road is private. If it's not, it's public right of way, city maintenance. That's why typically we would, you know, whether it's been, you know, I'm not the development official here. I know what Canton was because I did it for 8 years up there, but all the roads up there were built to city standards. We can let HOAs build roads that were not meeting the standards that we require for public streets. Because there's always a chance at some point, you know, they may decide to take the gate down and want to turn, and it's local council, turn these roads over to the city. That can happen. Just a vote, it's like you petition and you say, "Do I want to," but if it's behind a gate, that's not right. So all projects are completed, HOAs are formed as they're completed. Because after that time, it's the developer that is the HOA. So this is all turned over to the governing elected body of HOA officers. Contractors transfer their responsibilities to the HOA, and the leaders and members must stand for them. And the city stays engaged to support the community. I tell people, the only good news for me is done. Okay, news is usually not good. Okay, so to the degree that we can keep this communication open, transparent, keep it up to date, you know, so people can understand what's going on in real time and not have a lack of information or not lack of response, whatever. It's just got questions, don't hesitate to call. We'll put you in touch with the right people to develop. We'll put you in touch with that team. It's building, it's me, it's code enforcement. You know, we manage that differently. If it's planning and zoning, if it's whatever it is, we will funnel it. And you can make a call and you go see quick fix or whatever. You can engage. These are our contacts of the prime movers in this. There are others. Again, this PowerPoint will be posted somewhere, probably online or something. I don't know, Facebook, or you can just request it. You can send me an email. I'll send it to you. I'm kind of open source kind of. Then we have, obviously, the communication is important for us. Got this problem solved, right? But that's why I'm sure we find solutions to resolve things before things get expensive.
So I just we still have some more. Sandra DeWitt to come up to speak about a little bit about tree permits, tree removal permits. I know that's sometimes can become an issue, so you don't need only because it's getting recorded. So I think even though
I do. Can everybody hear me? Okay. Without the mic? No. Okay, so I'm Sandra DeWitt. I'm the arborist with the city of Milton. So I get a lot of questions about trees. So in Milton, we do have a tree ordinance. Unfortunately, not everybody's familiar with that, but you do need permits to take down trees a lot of times in Milton. The permit requirement starts at 15 inches in diameter at breast height, which is going to be 4.5 feet above ground level. So if you're taking down anything 15 inches or greater, please let me know and apply for a tree removal permit. So the ordinance does not really forbid tree removal necessarily, but we're going to guide you into if there's any replacement requirements or things like that. The main thing with the tree ordinance is we are trying to maintain our tree canopy in Milton. So I do enforce the tree ordinance for Milton, but as Gary said, I can't enforce the ordinance or the requirements of your covenants. So sometimes they don't always match. Sometimes covenants or HOA associations want you to get a permit for everything. So please make sure that you also check with your HOA and find out what their requirements are as well. Because just because you have a permit from me doesn't mean you're in the clear with your HOA all the time. So I get calls all the time from HOA people who said they didn't get a permit from us. I'm like, well, sorry, they got a permit from me. So just because their rules are sometimes different, just make sure you check with them on that stuff at any time you have tree permit issues. Okay, and we do have a Ask the Arborist. thing that you can do. So we will post stuff on Facebook. If you have a general tree question about tree health or a tree issue or something that you see maybe going on in the community, maybe you notice like, hey, why are these trees dropping their leaves now and nobody else is? There is a email that you can send out, ask the arborist at miltonga.gov, where you can ask those general questions. And a lot of times I will take the time to answer them. And we will also post them on Facebook and share them with everybody. Because a lot of times the questions that you have, other people have as well. So it's just a general tree information question that you can send. So I thought I saw somebody raise their hand in the back. Correct. So the question is a permit required if a tree has fallen? So if it's on the ground, you do not need a permit. If it is still standing and it is completely dead, if it's over 15 inches, you need a permit. So even for dead trees, you do need permits. But with a dead tree or a tree that is sick or unhealthy, we're going to waive any fee application requirements or any replacement requirements on those. But if it's on the ground, you're safe to go ahead and remove it. Sometimes I tell people, hey, you may just want to send me an email and let me know you're doing it, because the person driving by might not know that it was on the ground before you started sawing on it. So if I kind of have a heads up that that's what you're doing, if somebody calls, I don't need to run out there right away. Bradford pear. Mm-hmm.
So.
Well, okay, I haven't heard that. I wish somebody would pay me to take down a tree. But so if any healthy tree, there typically is a fee requirement. If there is an invasive species that is being removed or something like that, or if it's on our do not plant list, then I typically will waive the fees for those. But you still should get the permit if it's 15 inches or greater.
Okay, we're gonna save the questions for the end, so I still have public. So we're gonna have the assistant fire marshal come up and do a little bit of speaking and engaging, and then our representative from the police department, so.
I do have a short presentation. It's like 5 slides long, lots of pictures. This will be fast, and I also speak fast. And I'm happy to answer any questions at the end of this. I do get questions from HOAs all the time, whether it be questions about public display of fireworks or parking in front of a fire hydrant, or maybe parking in a no parking zone. So those are the type of things I field from an HOA level and oftentimes the public level. My name is Alex Fortner. I'm the Deputy Fire Chief with Milton Fire Rescue.
Sorry.
No, you're fine. No, I've got a lot of titles, so I don't take offense to that. I'm also the fire marshal for the city, so a lot of regulatory acts in regards to fire code comes through myself.
So I was saying that I don't have your fire.
Oh, we don't need it. We don't need it anyway. Like I said, the PowerPoint is okay. Don't worry about it. The PowerPoint was very short. It spoke to fire suppression and emergency medical services that we provide to the city. We incorporated in 2007, our fire department did. We have a total of 4 stations right now. We have 2 on the south side, 1 on the east, 1 on the west, and then 2 on the north, 1 on the east, 1 on the west. A couple of them are old Fulton County fire stations that we kind of just walked in the door whenever the city incorporated. And then we got Station 44, which Mr. Bob Buscemi just built for us not too long ago. And then our 5th and final station, which will be Station 45. If you've seen the sign, it's the roundabout at Birmingham and Providence and New Providence. So we're excited to get in that space. We have approximately 70 members, 70 fire rescue members. The majority of them are suppression personnel. And then of course we got administrative as well, right? Everything from, budgets to logistics to the fire marshal's office. So kind of a one-stop shop when it comes to emergency preparedness and keeping you all safe. Our emergency management department also falls within the purview of the fire department. So we take care of that for you as well. Again, I'm happy to answer any questions you all may have at the end of this. And you can take those answers. Yes, ma'am. Sure, I can speak to that, or if you all have questions at the end, I'm happy to discuss and give you some good answers. I know Gary spoke to the LDP phase for new developments. If you're not aware, the fire marshal does look at all new developments in the city of Milton, and we do that for a couple of reasons. A lot of bicycles out there. Yeah. So we do that for a couple of reasons, right? We want to make sure the roads are wide enough for our fire trucks. These are state mandated numbers that we enforce at the city level. We want to make sure that there's fire hydrants and water supply to put those, those pesky little house fires out. So we play a large role when it comes to development, believe it or not. Everything from fire hydrant placement to fire lane signage. I will speak to no parking signs. No parking signs on public streets is not an enforcement action of the fire marshal's office. Although I am a police officer myself, I don't enforce no parking on a public road. And I know Captain Barstow may speak to this in greater detail. I enforce fire lanes, right? And you may not see a lot of fire lane signage in your developments because it's something that's situational to maybe something very specific in your neighborhood that we have to make sure that let's say fire hydrant is clear at all times, or a particular section of road for whatever reason. That's where fire lane signage comes into play. That's where our enforcement action comes into play. And I'm sure Captain Barstow will speak to that in the latter. When it comes to private roads, I do not believe police have enforcement actions for no parking in private roads. And again, I'm sure he has more answers when it comes to that. And I'm happy to discuss anything that I spoke about today later if you have a specific question. We do. The question is, do we check fire hydrants annually? And we do. Our guys and girls check all hydrants, whether private or public. That's a question I may get from an HOA. Why is there a red tag or yellow tape around my fire hydrant that says out of service, right? So the majority of neighborhoods in the city of Milton have a private water line, which means that you are getting water from Fulton County, but there is a meter before it goes into development, which meters water usage, right? So everything behind that meter, hydrants included, belongs to you all, right? So when we go and check these fire hydrants annually, if we have a problem with a fire hydrant, let's say water doesn't come out, we tag it out of service, and then we get in contact with the HOA and let them know that needs to be repaired. Of course, if it's on Fulton County public water side, that's of course their responsibility.
Let's have Captain Barstow come up, and then after he finishes.
You should have seen the slideshow. It was awesome.
Oh, sorry, it's all my fault.
You said it's quick and 5 slides.
Hey, good evening, everybody. I'm Captain Charles Barstow. I'm with the Milton Police Department. I'm in charge of our support services division. So pretty much everything that is outside of uniform patrol is what I handle. So we're talking detectives, property and evidence, CALIA, records, pretty much everything that falls outside of the guys that show up to your door, guys and girls that show up to your door when you call 911. A lot of what we deal with when we speak of HOAs, and I am in a gated community as well, so I'm familiar with some of these problems. How many of you have those little group chats for your HOAs? Okay. Yeah, you know, where everybody's in there and they're like, oh, this car's parked here and this guy's house did this, da, da, da. I stay out of those. And the reason I stay out of those is just because people have a tendency to try and push their position. And look, I've been doing this for 30 years. I've got a pretty good feel for how it works and what to do. So I just stay out of those arguments. We had an incident in the neighborhood I live in where somebody was parking their car within 20 feet of a stop sign. And they were like, oh, you need to call the police. And I said, private property, not going to be able to do anything with that one. And that's kind of the crux of what I wanted to hit on tonight is the difference between public roadways and private roadways. Okay. When it comes to traffic enforcement, which is a lot of what we get complaints about, the normal stuff that you would be written for: speeding, following too closely, improper parking, in front of somebody's driveway, that kind of thing. Public streets, we can enforce that on. That's not a problem. As was mentioned earlier, OCGA covers that. And it says, you can't do this, you can't do that. You can't park this distance from a crosswalk. You can't park this distance from, a stop sign. You can't park in front of a fire hydrant. We can enforce that. When it comes to private property, so if you have an HOA with a privately maintained roadway, a gate across that, whatever it is, and correct me if I'm wrong, Bob, most of our private neighborhoods have blue signs indicating that street. The publicly maintained roadways have green signs. So if you're unsure of where your street is and what, it qualifies as, just look for that sign. They should be marked. We may have missed one or two, but for the most part, I think we probably got them. So when you're dealing with privately maintained roadways, we have very limited ability to enforce things other than serious traffic offenses. And when I say serious traffic offenses, I'm talking about DUI. I'm talking about reckless driving. I'm talking about homicide by vehicle, drag racing, things of that nature. Those are the things that we can come onto private property and enforce. Okay. Running a stop sign on a privately maintained roadway, we cannot enforce that. And just from a point of fact, let me go ahead and tell you that we've had people who live in these privately maintained neighborhoods and they said, oh, all of these people are running stop signs in our neighborhood. You can get in here and enforce this. You'd be surprised who's running the stop signs in the privately maintained neighborhoods. It's usually about 80% of the residents. And then once we start issuing citations, they're like, you know what? Thank you guys. We appreciate it. One of the other things we deal with, especially in neighborhoods with HOAs, is soliciting. It's difficult to enforce from the aspect of plausible deniability. So if you live in a neighborhood, you don't want to put a big neon sign up in front of your neighborhood that says no soliciting, right? It's gaudy, it's ugly, it's not, it doesn't go with the theme of your neighborhood. Want to put a little tiny sign that says no soliciting. Well, that's where plausible deniability comes in, because a person who is soliciting door to door may walk in there and say, I didn't see the sign, right? So it's going to be hard for us to issue a citation on that. What we suggest is for people to put a sign on their door or right in front of their house. And a lot of people are hesitant to do that because they're like, look, I have this nice house and I don't want to put this stuff all over my yard. I get it. But that's one of the things that's going to make it easier for an officer to come out here and say, okay, you didn't see that sign right in front of the door that says no soliciting. The traffic complaints, I'm trying to think of anything else that we deal with. Vandalism at the pool. Big takeaway for this is if you have a pool or a tennis court or something like that, we need to know who's on the HOA and represent your neighborhood. So when we come out in the middle of the night and somebody's in there throwing the tables and the chairs in the pool and damaging the bathroom and all that kind of stuff, just because you called and complained, we have to have authority from the HOA that says, I want this person prosecuted or I want this person criminally trespassed from this area. A lot of the times, once again, it probably is the neighborhood kids that are doing it. And so we'll come out there and kind of, keep the peace, make sure everybody knows who did it. Parents and HOAs will get together and try and resolve that stuff. But if it's kids from another neighborhood or another part of town that come in there, we need to be able to contact somebody from the HOA and say, okay, we're out here, we got a complaint, we found these people, what do you want to do with them? And I think that really covers most of our hot topics: traffic, soliciting, and then potential criminal trespass within the neighborhood.
They're legit solicitors, they come to the police department to get a
They do.
permit.
Yep, they have to be permitted to go door to door, and there's certain hours and days that they can go door to door. And I won't go down the rabbit hole with 501c3s and political organizations and religious organizations and things like that. But if somebody's trying to sell you a roof or somebody's trying to put pine straw in your yard, they have to have a door-to-door solicitation permit to come and knock on your door. All right? All right. Always call 911. That's the simple. The question was, what about calling 911 and what about calling the non-emergency number? First of all, let me tell you, both phone numbers are in the same building next to the same person. So it doesn't matter which one you call, you're going to get the same person. Everybody's like, well, I don't want to bother you with this. It's the same person. They're still going to pick up the phone and they're still going to answer it. Okay, let me rephrase that. Somebody should pick up the phone. Right. I think there's this myth that we look at things and go, well, it's not that critical. There could be, a horrible crime going on and I don't want to tie up 911. First of all, we're fortunate to live in a great city where we don't have a lot of crime. We use Alpharetta's 911 center. So they can get busy. If you have a heavy thunderstorm on Georgia 400 and there's cars piled, yeah, it might get busy. They're still going to pick up the phone. You might just get, move. Oh, you've got this. Okay, hold on. I've got a multi-car pile up. We'll get to you. The 297-6300 one. Sorry, I know it by heart. Yeah. Yeah, the voicemail, they give you this long spiel of, hey, if you want this, press 1. If you want this, just press 1. Press 1 is, I need to speak to an operator. I think they kind of catch you with the non-emergency line. They get you caught in who do you want to talk to and that kind of thing. It's easier just to call 911. There's no penalties, no fines. If you call and ask for a police officer or a fire truck or an ambulance, we're going to send one out there. But yeah, do not hesitate to call 911. Please don't. Non-emergency number, I honestly can't think of a use for it other than to go through that spiel and press 4, Yep. All right. Anybody else? Okay.
We'll start our Q&A
Come on back up,
session.
Alex.
Yeah, so I'm gonna pass one of these around so everybody, we have 2 of them, right? You have to turn it on.
Yeah, you got it.
Remo will be our little host.
Hi, this would be for,
Give it away.
I guess, private roads, Milton Preserve, fireworks. Our covenants say no fireworks. Does the city supersede, like saying yes, fireworks are allowed, or the state, or is it the HOA that says, it's in the covenants, no fireworks, so it's no fireworks?
I'm going to let you. The short version of this is that the state says that there are certain times that you can not disperse
Right, it did say
fireworks.
Diwali and 4th of July, I think, are
Right.
2.
And then almost every night up until 10 o'clock or something like that. I mean, that law changed to where there were no fireworks in the state of Georgia to, you could pretty much shoot them every night. And then on certain nights, you can shoot them until I think 1 in the morning or something ridiculous like that.
So is your answer the state supersedes the HOA? Is that the answer?
Yes. Now,
I will say this for the HOAs in here, or maybe even concerned citizens. There is a piece to the firework law that I do have to regulate from time to time, and that is fireworks are for private use only, right? So the minute it turns into a public use, you have to get permits through probate court, which has to be approved by myself. That's actually fixing to change. We're cutting probate court out of it completely, and it's simply going to come through fire. But when you have a public display, that's when it becomes a permitted event, right? And the reason behind that is we want people to be safe. A public display can happen simply by somebody posting on your HOA Facebook or HOA group chat saying, come to my house for this display. At that moment, it is now a public display. that is forbidden without permit. So there is some regulatory action when it comes to, if you're trying to stop it, people shooting fireworks off for the masses and not just for private use.
And then one more, we have a fire hydrant at the end of a street, a dead end. People tend to park right in front of it. So is that something the HOA can put a sign up, no parking?
You certainly don't have to put a sign up. If that were the case, there'd be signs, behind every fire hydrant. Just simply call us. Matter of fact, I've left my card up here. If we run out of copies, there's this cute little QR code on there. You scan it with your phone. You can save my number in there. I can get you an answer to any question you have. If I don't know it off the top of my head, I will get it to you rather quickly. No, you do not have to put a sign up. You simply call us if they're in violation of state law, which speaks to parking in front of a fire hydrant. They will. We tend to speak to education first, right, before we start going down that enforcement role. We don't want to be like the nasty fire department. We want to be the very friendly fire department before we get nasty.
I will say this, and you can speak to this in bigger cities where you show up to a fire and somebody's parked in front of the hydrant, you just run the hose through the car. That solves the problem.
Good evening. We have our subdivision is 29 townhomes in 7 buildings going around a big oval, so we have a big green space in the center. We find that in the evenings, we have teenagers who come and hang out there. Come morning time, you see a bunch of trash all over the place. What can we do to stop that?
Well, I think from a police perspective, it would depend largely on who the teenagers are.
We assume they don't live there.
If they don't live there and you might deem it as suspicious activity, then please call us. We'll come out there and check on them. I mean, we can say, hey, do you guys live here? Do you have a reason to be here? Are you visiting somebody here? That kind of thing. And after a while, they'll get the message. It does come back to making sure that we have that HOA contact, right? Because we can come out there and run people off and they come back, and then we run them off and they come back. It's a never-ending cycle unless we get to the point of, what do you want to do about this? But the only people that can speak to that are the HOA board, right? They're the ones that have to step up and say,
We're
okay,
here.
we want them criminally trespassed from this property. If they're kids in the neighborhood, that's more of an HOA thing for you guys to, try and educate and make sure, hey, look, and as well as I do, kids don't understand this. And I hate to say that because it makes me sound just, old. Because I was one of those kids. And now that I'm a property owner, I understand it.
Right.
So yeah, please don't hesitate to call us, even if it turns out to be nothing, if it's harmless, hey, it's a chance for us to interact with the community in a sense that, doesn't put the fear of God into children's.
We're not opposed to them hanging out there. There's a basketball court. We understand why they come. We have benches and so forth, but they leave all this trash, and it seems quite deliberate. So
Yeah.
we want to stop that.
Alex said you could throw a trash can out there, but then again, they'll probably just leave the trash there anyway.
So I have another question for the fire marshal, and thank you.
Yes, sir.
Those same 29 townhomes, 7 buildings.
Mhm.
Some of our homeowners have built fences in their backyard,
Sure.
so it prevents ingress or egress from either end. Are there any code violations when you see that?
That's gonna jump into the building officials world, in a sense. When it comes to a person's private home, I have very little regulatory action. I mainly speak to commercial properties when it comes to egress and ingress. So I'll turn that over to Gary. He may speak to the fact that maybe those fences aren't permitted, right? But that's not necessarily my world.
Okay, thank you.
So fences are required to be permitted. They can be somewhat of an issue in townhome environments for a variety of reasons, right? Like sometimes they put the utilities, like the meters and things like that, behind fences. It becomes
Right.
problematic for reading meters. That's always, because I've dealt with that with Georgia Power and Sony before. So we try to regulate that on the front end of the build out. And so it depends, right? So sometimes townhomes are fee simple, you own the property right below your house and the rest of it is managed in common, right? And sometimes the property goes from front to back on the property lines on the demising walls where the person on the end has a lot more land than the people in the middle kind of thing. So it depends, but regardless of that, a permit is required to build a fence in the city.
All right. Thank you very much.
All right.
Well, first, let me just say thank you for holding this tonight. I appreciate that. Two things I've got. One is our HOA management company does not require homeowners to supply an email address or a phone number. So when there are emergency scenarios where water is cut off or utilities are cut off, less than 50% of our community is getting notifications that are timely about these changes to utilities. So a suggestion to the city was a possible ordinance. One is to require that the HOA management companies have on file emails and phone numbers for every homeowner, plus a emergency communication method that should go out to everyone in the community. That's the first thing I would suggest maybe the city can do. The second, I live in a community where the HOA board is in violation of 5 or more of the covenants themselves. Now, do I need to hire my own legal resources and incur costs to enforce the board to meet the covenants that they're holding against the homeowners, or are there city resources that are available to represent homeowners when the covenants are not being met by the HOA board themselves?
So normally the answer to that is, if it's not in the city ordinances, if it's not part of the building codes, the regulatory functions that we are administering, we have no legal standing to make a statement about it or to claim some remedy, right? So if it's HOA standard, it's a HOA standard. If it exceeds the standard that we have, now, again, there could be things that overlap, and if they do, if we own the discipline, if we own the matter in the sense that we regulate it, then we will definitely do our part with that. But as far as the communication part, I don't know we have any parameters under which we could, mandate, communication lines to say we need to maintain a list of communications. Now, we do obviously get information like that when we get permits because we collect that data. We get phone numbers and we get emails, contacts for the process, but not just without some just cause or some standing for us to say, we need this information to proceed with this activity that we're engaged with you about. So I don't know if that answers your question, but. That, in my estimation, I would look at that as what does the covenant say in that regard? It should have some remedy for that. It should say if it applies to everybody, it applies to everybody, but that is a civil discussion, a civil matter that you have to manage through the empowerment that is afforded to you through the covenants that you have to hold all your members accountable for those standards. But we don't have anything that enables us to engage with that standard.
Okay. Thank you. I actually have a question, suggestion, and then a question. So for Mr. Witt, Mr. Mullinax, I have a permitting suggestion, maybe, especially trees, sorry. You mentioned that the HOAs should have their people, have their residents get permits and contact the city. We do that. On the flip side, is there any way and you guys may do this, I don't know, I never had a problem getting a permit. Is there any way on the flip side, you guys could say, this permit's approved to remove the tree, but you need to contact your HOA to see if you have to do anything to satisfy their requirements? Is that something you can even do?
Likely not
Okay.
legally. Because again, we don't have the enforcement action to, in fact, someone could be aggrieved by that. They could say, in the law, it's called ultra virus, which is like stay in your sandbox, right? So your powers are embedded in the legislation or the ordinance or the empowerment that comes from, in this case, the city code of ordinances, which enables us to work as home rule within that guidance. But we don't have any latitude to go beyond that and regulate, you know.
I'm not saying regulate, I'm saying suggest. When somebody comes and says, I'm gonna take down my tree.
We could, well, and I'm making that suggestion, right?
Okay,
I'm just not mandating. I can't.
no, that's
say,
fine, that's
unless
fine.
you do this, you don't get that, right?
No, we don't want the mandate. We just went back and forth actually with
Well,
our
I agree
homeowner.
with the reach out, let's get everybody educated, let's
Right.
tell them the value of it.
Exactly.
That's what I always promote, is
Exactly.
the value of transparency, of the process, of getting people to where their expectations are clear. And then when the process is done, everybody is satisfied that their expectations were met. What they agree we can make that happen, we will.
Okay, that's perfect. We just had an argument. We had a homeowner arguing that because the city said she didn't have to replace her tree, but our standards say you have to replace your tree. So that was the push there. And it's like, well, why do you want your house, your yard to be plain, boring and ugly? You know,
Right,
every
so-
other house has a tree except yours.
Well, like Sandra said, it depends on the tree, right? If it's disease, damage on the ground.
Right, no, this was just a big tree. She just doesn't want to take care of her yard because there's a tree in it. So
Oh,
anyway, it was
it's
just,
shaded or something, it's just
that was just a
grow grass.
suggestion, yeah.
Well, I got that problem.
Well, leaves fall, and, you know, you have to rake leaves and blow leaves and things like that.
Yeah.
The other thing, code enforcement, we have a problem where we have single-family homes, all detached single-family homes. We have multiple families living in a single home and not parents, children, grandchildren, in-laws, cousins, nephews, brothers, sister, and his family. Is that anything code, if we give you an address, can code enforcement investigate that, or are we just kind of stuck
Normally,
with that?
That kind of standard is embedded into zoning ordinances typically, and I'd have to look and see, I'm not the zoning manager, and we can look at this and respond back to that. I know I've been through that before in other jurisdictions, because I've been doing it in this Metro Atlanta area for 35 years, so I've seen that happen. Generally, a lot of ordinance would say a core family and two people not, you know, related by birth or marriage or something to that effect, right? The building code doesn't really deal with it because there is no occupant load in a single family dwelling. It doesn't say X amount of square foot per person. Good measure, you got 12 children, whatever, then that's the nature of the business, right? But how many strangers can you take in? Because at a certain point, and when I was in East Point, we had this problem. It turned into a boarding house. Because people would have, I'd go in there, there'd be locks on things and you know, cabinets and 3 refrigerators, locks on them, stuff like that. That we do regulate. When we get to the point where we are, you know, managing something that is, you know, where a lot of strangers are living in a house, there are codes that manage that, and I will deal with that if that's happening.
Yeah, so it kind of reminds me, it's not directly, oh, sorry, yeah. I don't do what I tell people, yeah. I tell other people to do it, but I don't do it. Okay, so let me give you, it is a tough thing to enforce as far as, you know, going up to somebody and saying, you know, you have, especially if they're related, because this is what the code says, because a single family house, a family, okay. The term family means one or more persons related by blood, marriage, adoption, guardianship, or other duly authorized custodial relationship, or up to 4 unrelated persons occupying a dwelling unit and living as a single housekeeping unit. The term family does not include persons occupying a rooming house, boarding house, lodging house, or a hotel. So, you know, that's what it's, I mean, you can have your family. And so if many cases they're related, it's really hard to say, no, you can't all live there. Now, let me say, if it is Mr. and Mrs. Smith who live there, and then they start renting out rooms and they're advertising it. Like we've had a situation a few years back where it was advertised like on Nextdoor or somewhere, hey, I rent rooms. Now we can deal with that because they're soliciting to have somebody charge as like a rooming house. And this says you can't do that. So on the relative part, it's really hard to enforce that. Now, if there's issues like with parking, you know, if they start parking on the grass, you're not allowed to park on the grass. You can call code enforcement and we'll send them out, and actually we do the C-click fix. I'm sorry. It's actually a better way to do things. Just snap a picture. It's anonymous if you want it to be, and then we'll follow up with it. That kind of brings me up to something, reminds me about Airbnbs. It's related, right? I get a lot of questions. Somebody will call me and say, hey, I'm buying this house and I want to rent out the, you know, pool house, you know, or whatever, the garage apartment, and have it as Airbnb. And I'm like, well, you're not allowed to do that. We don't have anything in our code that says no Airbnbs or short-term rental, but what the code says is that a home, whether it's single family or whether it's a townhouse or whether it's an apartment, it says that you cannot operate it like a hotel or motel. So the definition of hotel or motel is when you have people renting or, you know, paying for nights less than 30 days. So that allows you to rent your house, right? You can rent it for a year, you can rent it out for 6 months, whatever, but you can't start renting it out day by day or for 3 days. So even though we don't have anything that says no short-term rentals, that's how we enforce it. Now, again, we don't go around knocking on doors, checking to see if there's people renting out their rooms or their guest houses, but we do react to complaints. So there was a situation on Hamby Road where somebody was complaining there was an Airbnb. And so basically, eventually they stopped doing it and they sold the property. So again, that's where the position of the city is. So, okay. Yeah.
Go get the police department the cyber stuff.
Okay.
Yeah. You know that in order to rent out your Airbnb or whatever it is,
Right.
you have to advertise, right?
Right.
We'll find you.
Yeah. Yeah. So who? Right. Yeah. So who else? Oh, yeah.
I have two questions, one for the police and one for enforcement. Our subdivision, they put in cameras about 14 years ago at our pool because we had vandalism with somebody putting concrete in the pipes and the filtration system. So we put cameras in. We really haven't had an issue. I guess what we do right now is if there's an alarm, our security company, Loud Security, they send the thing to one of the board members. We get online to see whether or not it was a deer or something that set off it so that the police don't go out. Because my understanding is like false alarms after so many, it's like $150.
You're correct on that. And it's great. Look, if you can look at those cameras or whoever look at those cameras and say, yeah, nobody's breaking in, nobody's trashing the pool, cancel us immediately. And that'll save you the trouble.
One of the things, normally that's after hours, right after our pool closes and things. But sometimes we have a special alarm that goes off in our pump room. It could be during the day. We turn off all the motion detectors when the pool's open from 5 a.m. to 10 p.m. But during that time, sometimes there might be an alarm that goes off because, you know, somebody got in the pool equipment room. And then that would go to the Loud, and then they'll either, you know, send it out. Do you want the police to go? Well, they'll try to get a hold of somebody. Sometimes they can't, you know, we work. This is not our full-time jobs like you guys. So I guess what happens at Anson? Would it be still a false alarm and you go out there and you don't see anybody? I would assume it would be.
Yeah, that's what it really comes down to. Obviously, if we come to your house, you know, on an alarm and we find a door kicked in or window, we're not going to charge you for that. You're a victim of a crime at that point. If we come out there and, you know, the pool pump room looks locked and secured, there's no indications of a break-in, whatever. Yeah, it's going to count as a false alarm.
But we did, I mean, we only bring this up because we've never had a problem in, I guess, 14 years. But one person started saying they don't want to be monitored at the pool on the cameras. And we're like, well, you don't monitor it 24 hours. Nobody's looking at it. But we're like, well, it's a public area. We have cameras for a reason. So that's why we kind of, ran into that.
Right. Yeah. As far as that goes, I would think the HOA can, work that out about whether the cameras, it's a cost benefit thing, right?
Right.
Are you preventing people from breaking in as opposed to somebody that thinks that somebody is spending their entire day eating pizzas and looking at the camera feed from the pool?
Right. And I want that, some of the other HOA folks, I just kind of want to know if you have a camera at your pool, or something, do you guys monitor, or do you have a third party people, or whatever? So maybe you can come up after the meeting, but then I had a question we have a stream buffer in our community, we have 192 homes, and there's a pond behind us that's owned by Foster's. I think it's 40-acre pond. He has like 192 acres. So we have some people in the stream buffer and in the floodplain areas. They have put like platforms or decks or something. And my understanding was you can't have anything built in the floodplain because some of these things have come down in our retention ponds, but have come over into, the other people's ponds. How do you guys handle that?
Well, first of all, if it's built, it needs a permit, all right? And that's how we would confirm whether or not it was compliant based on where it was built and what it was. It's not impossible to build something, quote, in the floodplain. It can happen, but there are rules associated with it. So unless we have the scope of work, we wouldn't know how to apply that. But anybody who builds a deck or builds a platform or installs in the floodplain, in the ordinance, it basically says any development. And development means any man-made change in the floodplain has to be permitted. That's what the flood damage prevention ordinance says. And the city has that to comply with FEMA standards in order to provide flood insurance in the city. We have to maintain FEMA standards per their 44, 30 or what is 60 yard, whatever it is. Anyway, the point is their rules, they're specific to the floodplain, and anything that happens in that floodplain requires a permit.
What about the stream buffer within 75 feet, 50 and 25?
Well, that's a DNR state mandated buffer through the North Metro water planning districts. And so in the first 25 foot, you're not supposed to disturb anything, right?
Right.
And then as you get farther away, it's all about impervious surfaces and development. So in the last part, you still can't put things that are impervious, right? That stop the water infiltration, such like that. So the answer typically is not. You'd have to have a variance in order to.
So yeah, so the 25 street buffer is the same. Now is city. 50 and then 75. And then 75 is a non-impervious. Breaking it, but you can't put structures in are non-impervious.
So that's the thing. You call up and ask, bring your scope of work, and we would apply the rules to it, what it would be. So like retaining walls are a problem a lot of times in buffers, because even though it's only this wide, it still is an impervious surface.
It's there, we have to tell you so you can go out.
Right, so I would use your C-click fix.
To report
Take
it.
a picture or whatever, report it, it's easier with. So any more, we have time.
We had
for-
just the one here and that gentleman over there. 2 more questions.
Gary, in your presentation, you briefly mentioned when you're the city of, that they decided to take over any facility or whatever related to storm retention. Is Milton considering that?
I don't know. I'm not the development official here. We'd have to speak to.
I would love that.
Well, yeah, I'll tell you how it was managed in the city. And again, that discussion doesn't come to me generally. It would probably be public works and site land development, things like that. But we established a stormwater utility in order to fund it. Right? And stormwater utilities are based on the amount of impervious surface that each property has. So in a house, it might be just $10 or $15 a year. In a commercial property, it would be based on the parking lot and the building, such like that. So that's what funds the purchase of the easements, the replatting of the easements, the access, and the protection for like stormwater inlets, things like that, or buying trucks to suck leaves out of stormwater devices so that they're function properly at the right time. and also to maintain detention ponds.
But no, we're not doing
No.
that. I mean, I'm not saying it's never, but.
Today, no.
A lot of people don't understand what they're supposed to be doing, what their responsibility.
Well, if you've ever seen a detention pond fail, you'd understand why it's important.
That's exactly what I'm about. Developer, lawsuit if you didn't take. Kind of fixed it, but we had to spend a lot of money.
Right.
So if the city was enforcing it, the people, we wouldn't have to go chasing after, that would be.
Well, I mean, again, that gets back to the will of the people, the citizens, and the will of the council, to them to address it as they would see fit.
So I need to come to the council and talk about it?
Yeah.
Speak to your representatives, yes, I would. Obviously, again, more information is better. The value is what it is. Some people think, because it depends, right? How many ponds are out there? What's the status of them? You know, and I'm not the development official here, so I'm not the person who would be prime contact. But again, that we have people that do such things here, so we can get you in touch with them.
Well, the contact for that. Once the development is done, the detention pond covers responsibility, private property that they're on or the HOA. Have an MS4 agreement where we do. That's not when we do inspections on a routine basis. There's a schedule for inspections and stuff, and what they'll do is they'll do an inspection and say, yours is not up to science and you need to fix it. Bye. So Rob may want to touch on that a little bit. But that is like it becomes a public works after it's done with the development.
I'll be quick. Good evening, everyone. Public Works staff puts eyes on every pond in the city every 5 years. It's required by our permit. Just because you've never, it's part of our audit for our report. I can guarantee you, we've put eyes, one of our staff members have been on every pond in the city once every 5 years.
Thank you. First of all, thank you for this. This is wonderful. You had mentioned about the surety bonds and things like that to hold developers accountable. Our developer's gone. The neighborhood's come over to the association. We've got a green space buffer and there is a ton of silt fence still present. Is there any recourse that we have, or is that the homeowner's responsibility?
How long ago did that happen? How long ago did you take maintenance or whatever?
It's hard to say. The first developer declared bankruptcy, a second one came in. So ultimately, we've had the neighborhood since 2015, 18, I'm sorry.
We'd have to look at that. I can't speak to that exactly. Of course, I'm the building official, so it wouldn't be me anyway, but.
Well, I would say contact, and I know Tracy Wilds is not here. She's our land development manager, so I will kind of speak on her behalf. But you can contact Tracy and we can check and see if we have any maintenance bonds left, because normally the performance bond is for at the beginning, right? When we want you to finish all the stuff and we want you to do the performance. Once they've gotten to a certain point, we may release some of those performance bonds or we may turn them over to maintenance bonds. So a lot of times erosion control is one of those things that we turn over into a maintenance bond, because they may still have some stuff going on in there that may still require erosion control. And then once it gets to a certain point, they can request that maintenance bond back. Sometimes they don't request it back. You'd be surprised how many people forget they have money. I can't believe it. I would not forget I had money out there, but people forget they have money out there for whatever reason. And we sometimes still have bonds. So, you may, 2018, that was quite a while ago, so I'm not sure, but sometimes we still have maintenance bonds that we may still have available. But again, it's kind of it's kind of like our assurance that things get done completely. Actually acting on those bonds is not always an easy task, especially if they're surety bonds. It's basically just a piece of paper, and getting somebody to pay on that piece of paper sometimes is a long process, longer than just going out and ripping out the silt fence yourself. So, but we could check on that and see if there's a maintenance bond. And sometimes if there is still a maintenance bond, we can try to contact the developer or whoever issued that bond. But sometimes it's after that period of time, the people, sometimes it's LLCs and things like that, that broke up after the development was done. So we might not be able to track somebody down all the time. But we can look into it and just see, and if we can track them down and say, hey, we still have this bond, but if you go remove that silt fence, we'll give you the bond back. We can try, but no promises, but that's something you can check. So again, Tracy Wilds handles our bonds and she would be the contact you can reach out to about that.
I would be remiss if I didn't mention this. The fire department has a platform called Community Connect. I've got some flyers up here for you as well as a QR code on the back. Community Connect is a free and secure platform in which homeowners can input information for fire department response, right? So if you have a gate, a private gate, and you want to put the gate code in there, if you have a child with disabilities and you want to say that they're on the first floor or the second floor, or if you have dogs in the kitchen, right? Community Connect is a great place to document specific information about your particular home that we will get en route to an emergency. Another program we've just started, we're working on an ordinance currently, but this is more for firefighter safety. A lot of Milton residents have EV cars, right, with special charging stations that are extremely dangerous to responding firefighters and pose a risk and special considerations when it comes to extinguishing these fires. We're making, these are kind of prototypes, but we're asking people with EV cars to kind of put these things on their maybe garage or maybe on the Community Connect, right? We have an EV car with 2 charging stations in our garage that helps us be safe, right, too. So please grab a flyer before you go. Sorry to interrupt, Robin. Thank you.
I just want to say too, like they said, fire department does a great job. They have a CARES program, not really related to HOA, but probably on your website.
Yeah, absolutely. If you have somebody with disabilities or needs, right, or maybe be underserved, let's say an elderly person who just got discharged from the hospital, this CARES program enables us to make contact with them and help them, right? When they get home, we'll go to their house and say, hey, are you taking, excuse me, are you taking your medications properly? Are you eating okay, right? We'll change wound dressings, things like that. So keep that in the back of your mind. Visit the city website, specifically the fire department, because we got a lot of great programs that a lot of people aren't taking advantage of.
You guys just came out
Exactly. We've got so many programs. It was in this awesome slideshow presentation I had. But we've got a lot of programs and we hit on a lot of different aspects of fire and life safety. So we're happy to help and we have people that like to do that kind of stuff. So keep us in mind.
And then just lastly, we have a bunch of cards up here and the things that Alex has from the fire department and different personnel with our cards. And so again, we're so appreciative for you guys taking this time to come and hopefully this has been helpful to you. So thank you.